Welcome friends to another unit. This unit we're going to be talking about probability. Now my slides here say lesson 2 because lesson 1 was simply a review of converting between decimals, fractions, and percent. And that's something that by grade 7 you should be familiar with. And I do talk about it in some of the other previous units. So I thought I would get right into it. This lesson is about listing the possible outcomes when you do various probability experiments. Now, I want you to remember this. And again, that's a good way to launch into the probability. And that is when you roll a number cube, that they call it here, or a die, all the outcomes are equally likely. All right. And the same thing with the spinner here. I know it's not perfectly clear, but as you can see, all those different options are equally likely. So try to bring some of those terms back that you would have been using in previous years. Now there's a definition here that I do want you to be familiar with, and that is a tree diagram. Now a tree diagram, it's a way of visually laying out all the possibilities of various probability experiments. And you only use a tree diagram if you have 2 or more different possibilities. And I'll show you an example here. Once I show you, it makes sense. So in this experiment here, if you have 2 coins that you're tossing, you would toss your first coin, you get 2 possibilities of heads or tails. And then when you get to your second coin, you would toss that and you would get the same probabilities, heads or tails. This is how you would lay it out so that you could see all the different possibilities. So again, here's your first coin, your 2 options, a heads or a tails, and then from there you would toss your second coin and you would have another heads or tails. But notice how it's branching out. So under your first coin, if you would take your heads, for example, if you would toss that, you would toss your second coin, you're still going to get heads or tails again. And even if the first coin is a tail and you toss your second coin, you're still going to get heads or tails again. All right, so as you can see, we have branches. We have the different titles going on here, and we visually lay them out. And we usually use the first letter of the word, so it will help identify whatever it is that we're talking about, meaning I don't actually write the word heads out, I just use the H. And same thing for tails. Now the next column here says outcomes, and that's where you actually list all the different possibilities, and you follow the tree branches to help you out with this. So for here, I have a heads, you'll see I have a heads and a heads here, and this is where you have this outcome here. So I have 2 H's. And the same thing here, if I go and I go to another branch, I may start with the heads in my first flip. If I go to my second one, I get tails, and here is my outcome, heads or tails. And again, my third and fourth branches are read the same way. And again, that's how you get these ones out. So I can get tails and heads, I'll get TH, and tails and a tails, and I get 2 T's. So what I have here is, I just have one example for us to go through because that's all this lesson really is using tree diagrams. So I have here, Farah tosses a coin and spins the pointer on this spinner. So there's 4 different parts here. The first one is to draw a tree diagram to show all the possible outcomes. And then B, list the possible outcomes. C, how many outcomes include the pointer landing on pink, and how many outcomes include tails. So you can pause them now, go through all 4, or you can pause the video as we go along. I'm going to go into and answer question part A here. So for A is asking us to use a tree diagram to show all the possible outcomes. So the question says that she tosses a coin and spins a spinner. Now here is where how I've organized this in terms of whether you do a coin first or spinner first. It really doesn't matter as long as you have the number of possibilities are being equally represented. So for here, we're going to do the spinner first, and you see you have blue, pink, and yellow, and that's what I have here, pink, yellow, and blue. And again, I use the first initial. And then from each of those, It says here we've tossed a coin. You can see the second column, I've put coin. And from each of those colors, I'm now going to list heads or tails, but I'm doing that for every single possibilities. So as we've talked about reading on the previous slide here, if I spin pink, then I'm going to toss a coin, I can still get the possibility of heads or tails. And the same thing, if I have yellow on my spinner and I flip my coin, I'm still going to get heads or tails, and same thing for the blue. The only thing that you're going to have to remember is please make sure that you have that third column that says outcomes and you're actually listing the outcomes. But use the letters here, it will help kind of speed you up. So your first outcome, for example, you could spin a pink and then you could have heads on your coin. Well, I have a PH. And I could do pink on my spinner and I could flip a T and I would have pink and then tails. But you're going to continue that as you go along. Now that's really important, the organization, because it will help you answer the questions later on, but will also help you see how many different possibilities that you're going to have. So according to this experiment, we're going to have 6 different possibilities here depending on the combination that we're getting, and that's important. Okay, so here's the second part, list all the possible outcomes. Now this is nice because if you had already listed the outcomes on the previous slide there, then it makes it very easy for you to actually list all of them, and you're not going to miss any of those possibilities. All you have to do is just simply lay them out, and you would get that from the outcomes column of your actual tree diagram. All right, and the third one, how many outcomes include the pointer landing on pink? Again, you would go back to your initial tree diagram, and it will really help you see the 2 possibilities, pink and heads and pink and tails. But again, if you don't get the initial tree diagram accurately and spend time with that, then these questions are a little bit more difficult to do, and you may possibly miss an outcome. And the last question, how many outcomes include tails? Again, all I'm doing here is I'm actually listing them out, and there are 3 outcomes, and I actually tell you what they are. Okay, so there's your lesson for today. Again, spend your time doing the tree diagram. Don't try to shortcut it. Don't try to speed through it. It's really important for you to take your time because sometimes your tree diagrams may have 2 levels. Sometimes it may even have 3. So don't forget that outcomes column, really important to answering all these questions. So if you need to watch the video again, definitely by all means go ahead and do so. If not, we'll see you in the next episode. Bye.